we have everybody here. So just so if you're coming in and you're like, why, I want to just go ahead and say this, and mods, you can continue to reiterate this throughout the night. The housekeeping items before we start, make sure to continue tapping that screen. That helps get this out for everybody who wants to hear it. We made this a sub-only chat to protect people's mental health because unfortunately there are people who are very, we'll just use the word, inconsiderate of the family and friends that are up here. And we're just not going to have that happen tonight, not here. So basically, anybody who chooses to sub for the entire, at least to me, for the entire month of February, so even prior to tonight and even after tonight, we are going to donate. We're going to share basically anything that comes from subscriptions and donate that to the Gabby Petito Foundation. I think that that's a really good compromise for doing that and gives people a worthwhile reason to subscribe if they want, because the money goes to a good cause. But again, do not feel obligated unless that's something that you just want to do. The last thing I will say too before we start is this little one right next to Rose. It says Real Victims, which we'll talk a little bit about later. That is the new podcast that I've done with Dan and myself, and Rose, Jim, and Nikki were the first guests on it. It is where they are critiquing basically the Lifetime movie that was made a few years ago when everything happened without their permission, without a phone call, without giving them any type of money. But they bought bracelets, I guess. So that's a thing that they did. But it was done without their permission. So basically, Lifetime said it was based on a true story. And I think the only thing that was true was your names. And obviously, Jim and Rose, they got your characters dead on.
I mean, the guy that played me, I mean, that was a pretty accurate description.
It was very accurate. Rose, too.
He was tall. He was good looking. Probably had good abs, but they didn't really show that.
They had that one crotch shot they just zoomed right in on for you.
Yeah. You picked that out, not me, but I'm just...
Oh, excuse me? No, you're the one that... No, you're like... Because I'm like, what are you talking about? You're like, when I was in the kitchen pouring water for Nikki and Rose, they just zoomed right in there. You were very...
Justin, I think you were the one that brought it up.
No, it was Jim.
Justin paused on it.
Yeah. There.
That part might be true. That part might be true.
My character, on the other hand, I don't know. For some reason, Jim got hair. I didn't.
I know it's a very
short.
It's a sore spot for you.
Yeah, and he was short.
Yeah, I mean, it was like Timu, like Michael Chiklis.
That's funny. See, a lot of people don't know Michael Chiklis, but I get that.
So, yes, GabbyPetitoFoundation.org. I'm wearing my merch tonight. Hi, Katie. Nice to meet you.
Hello. Good to be here.
So here's kind of what we're going to talk about tonight. Obviously, you guys have some questions about the documentary. We want to put some rumors to bed. And I really want to give Jim and Nikki and Joe an opportunity to talk about the Gabby Petito Foundation, what they've been doing, because they have truly been making a difference since everything's happened and since this has reignited a lot of the conversation surrounding Gabby. I think that it's important to talk about everything that they have been doing since, because it's very important work. It's very, every time I talk to Jim, I learn something brand new. And every time I talk to Joe, I get corrupted a little bit more. And I'm kidding, Joe. And anyways, do what? I'm not lying?
I said, you're not lying, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess let's do the things that they really want out of the way first. Is there anything that y'all want to talk about in regard? Oh, we lost Katie. She'll come back, I think.
Actually,
is there any?
When Katie comes back, we wanted to bring in for a little bit when we talk about domestic violence a little bit. I'm sure we're going to have a conversation. It's Respond is the account. It's like it's a DV agency, but she doesn't have a lot of followers. I don't know if she'll be able to even come up at all, but it says that she would be able to come up. She might not be able to turn her camera on. But if someone requests and it says Respond, that's one of our people.
Well, there's 15 people requesting, and I'm going to tell you guys right now, if you're not on the list of somebody that Nikki's asked, do not request to come up. You will be denied. That's just how it is. That's how this tonight's going to go. We're not doing anything where people who aren't pre-picked are coming up. So is there anybody outside of Katie and the person that you mentioned that's supposed to be coming up?
No.
Okay. So we'll bring Katie back up and then we should be good. All right. In regard to the documentary, because I know a lot of people have questions about that, is there anything that any of y'all want to talk about on it as far as accuracies, inaccuracies? I mean, I think everything was pretty well done, or anything said that you guys wanted to say but didn't get the opportunity to do so. Not everyone.
Joe can talk.
Me, Jim smiled first.
I think we would have maybe liked to just see some like experts or somebody in there just pointing out some key things through it, which I know that's not always like their style, but I think they did a pretty good job of trying to cover as much as they did in that. But we're getting people are reaching out to us. It's basically what we've been doing for the last couple of days is going through like emails and requests and different things. And so I just feel like it was like an opportunity in there to be like, hey, if you identify that you are experiencing abuse or DV at this time, like these are the resources to go to. I know they have the little thing at the end, but I almost feel like in that moment, like when it hits certain things, like that was probably a good point for it. But I know that's kind of not their format. So, we're just kind of trying to play a little catch up now with that on our end with people reaching out and trying to make sure we link them to, the proper resources and stuff. So I think we've gone through.
I do think the stats that they had at the end were very powerful. I don't think that they were enough based on conversations that I've had with you.
They're powerful stats. I'll tell you, like a lot of the emails that we're getting is just survivors telling their stories. So been reading through a lot of those stories, and they're not looking for a response back, but just sharing similarities of what they experienced to what Gabby and so many others go through. And a lot of them also, even before the documentary, seeing the case unfold and realizing like they were in a bad situation and they were able to safely get out. So I think that's like something that's really important to stress is you can't just leave. That's the most dangerous time for a person experiencing that. But getting connected with somebody and developing that proper safety plan to safely get out and preparing yourself for it. So, that's something that we've now put like the disclaimer on the website and stuff like that. So it comes up like we're not direct services, like we're not like a hotline or anything like that. So like if you need immediate services right now or you're in immediate danger, call 911. And then I think he spent the whole day getting that all uploaded on there. So like you get a pop-up as soon as you go to our website for what to do, how to safety plan, and what available resources there are right at that moment. So it's been a lot. It's been a lot since that came out.
It's hard. It's not easy, And I would have liked to see more of a learning tool. More, this is if you find yourself in this situation, this is what you do and stuff like that. Some of the legislative stuff that we did to help teach people what to do in their own states would have been nice. But listen, we're always going to want to do things as a learning, method. I guess for TV, it's not like that as much as we would want it to be. But
well, Joe, you have an audience right now of almost 2,000 people. For people who might want to help, one of the questions I got that I was asked to ask you all this evening was, have any laws been passed in Gabby's memory? And to a degree, the answer to that is yes, and I'll let you do that. But if you want to take the time and tell people what they can do in their states to get the ball rolling and what has been done, please, by all means.
Let everybody go and kind of talk about this that you were going to ask, and I'll go that route. Let's get some teary eyes going, and then we'll go into the whole.
All right. All right, we can wait. We can table that one. Okay, so if we can, there's something that I would like to do if y'all are okay with it, because I know some information and it wasn't shared in the documentary, so I'm going to leave it up to you guys if you want to. As I'm sure y'all have seen, there's a lot of rumors out there. There are people who are completely unconvinced or are completely convinced that Brian is still alive. And the reason that they think that is because, from what everything was told, the rumors are there were 2 bones that were found and that his uncle, who was a dentist, is the one who identified them. Would you like to put those rumors to bed?
It's very simple. He's dead. It's very simple. There's proof of it. So, yeah. I mean, he took the coward's way out. He's not with us anymore. And, yeah. His whole body was found. Yeah.
It was more than 2 bones that were found. They found basically all but 2 bones.
Well, and I think it also comes down to like, yeah, he is dead, but like, it doesn't change anything. I feel like it's such an irrelevant thing to even want to talk about. Like, he's dead. Don't come up with any more. In my opinion, like every time I've seen something, I'm like, not who cares, but like, that's not what is important of all of this. This is not what needs to be taken away. This is not what should be getting talked about right now, in my opinion.
I agree with you, Rose, which is actually the reason why I thought it was important, is because if you take that away, then then you can't continue talking about that. You know, if you know beyond the shadow about they hear it, we know that he's gone completely. Then there's no way to keep doing these rumors, and maybe he can just go away, and we can focus on what matters. So that was kind of my thought there.
And for us, I mean, I think the focus is just on what we're trying to do: prevention and education, legislative work that we can do, and just trying to help people. That's our focus. We try to stay in the positive. We try not to focus on any of that stuff. Only what we can control, and that's what we're doing each day. And I'll tell you that, you know, we brought more board members on. We brought some more volunteers on, because we're just getting very overloaded, which it's a good thing, but it's a bad thing. You know, it's a good thing that people are reaching out, but it's a bad thing that there's such a demand for help. And that's why we're hoping to try to build out these prevention education programs to reduce those numbers. Start talking about respectful relationships and healthy relationships at a younger age for children before they begin to experience this. And you know, something that I always say is we teach young girls about red flags, but imagine a world where we also taught men how to be respectful, so a woman never has to worry about a red flag, right? So it's like really educating both sides on what's healthy boundaries, being respectful. And that's what our focus is just trying to help as many people as we can.
And what would you, for parents of little boys or little girls, what are the things that you specifically that you would recommend for them as either resources or things to share, you know, whatever you think that they need in order to help teach their girls, you know, the signs, and teach their boys to be more respectful? What would you say there?
Can I, on that topic, can I introduce our friends, because I don't know how long they can stay.
Yes.
So we have Katie and Kelsey from the Unpoppers. So from Response, she's amazing. Kelsey, I don't know if you can turn your camera on. You might not be able to.
You know, Justin, I don't know if they told you, it's my first TikTok, of which I'm already like, it's Friday night. We're hanging back and talking about murder and helping survivors, and I love it. I have no idea how to I try to do the picture I can't, so I can talk. If there is a way to get my photo, I'd love to do that as well.
So let's fix that real quick. So I think you need 200. Do you need 200 followers or more to be able to turn your camera on? You're 51 away. Can we get
I feel like we don't need to emphasize that I'm a loser yet. But
no, it's your first one, so you're not.
He'll get you the guys. Go follow her.
If you would like to see someone on a Friday night who is here to talk with y'all, I'd be happy to do it. I can also
get 99 followers. We need 100. Sorry,
no,
you don't. You're following 99. You have 300. Now you have 332. It says you might be able to turn on your camera.
Okay, so click on the box that you're in, and then hit the little camera.
So I'm hitting it. It still will not let me do anything.
Have video access. Why not?
Okay. That's okay.
I mean, this is like my, it's like COVID and doing training where you just talk for 8 hours to yourself and hope people are listening, which I can do. But so if we can't change it, that's fine. I'm happy to talk. We'll love to see everyone's faces, but that's okay if we can't make it happen.
Well, people will follow, and we'll continue to try is what we'll do. But you're at 522, so I thought it was 205. So we'll see how it is if we can get you there. Somebody says you might have to jump out and then close the box and come back, and you might be able to do that
real quick. And you can introduce Katie, or Katie can introduce herself, and I'll close out and come right back.
Love it.
All right, let's see if that fixes it.
Okay.
All right, Katie, you want to introduce yourself?
Well, my name is and I am an administrator at a charter school in South Carolina. And I have also been a victim of domestic violence, but more importantly, have been able to use my story to be able to spread awareness to other women, especially other young women in circumstances where they may not understand that they're in a relationship that is leading toward assault. And so I'm just super grateful that I've been able to work with Respond Against Violence over the past 2 years to be able to spread awareness about the signs in ways that victims can get resources when they don't know what they need when they're coming out of those situations. So that's what I've tried to champion, and happy to be here, and thank you guys for having me.
No, well, thank you for bringing your resources and your expertise.
Did that work or no?
No, not yet, but we'll keep trying. We'll keep trying. We'll see once you get to, if you get to 800, which you're at you're at 563.
I mean, I feel like we are playing like a lottery at the same time, a game of bingo, at the same time as like a fundraiser where we are racing. It's fun to watch. I like immediate gratification, so I like watching the numbers.
Yeah, welcome to TikTok.
But I am happy to introduce myself with just audio, or Nikki, if you want to introduce, however.
No, I want you, because Justin asked a great question, and we talk about, like, a lot of parents ask, well, how can they help their kids? What can they do? What can we do for the younger kids? And I thought that would be a great time to bring you in, because you have so much experience and expertise that your answer would probably be a lot more clear than ours. So definitely introduce yourself first.
You know, Justin, so my name is Kelsey McKay. My background is I am a former prosecutor. I specialized in, I think I have to say it in Pig Latin in order for it to work on TikTok. But the cause of death in Gabby's case, that was my specialization for the last 22 years. I left prosecution 8 years ago, and since then have continued on the journey with survivors and both represent survivors and victims in all different legal systems, and have learned through that process that justice often does not come in a criminal or any legal system, and have really focused the last few years alongside with my cases on building different pathways to justice. And my focus is really, what is the empowerment and not the BS, none of that. What are the things that allow people to walk away from these horrific situations, drop the mic, feel empowered, and get stuff done? And so I've met the Petito family, the Schmidt family. I'm so grateful to be connected with them. And Justin, I just have to say, thank you for doing what you're doing so often. The voice of the survivors, and more importantly, the longer conversation that can come from moments like this, is left out. So thank you for doing that. And so I appreciate that. And I have a lot of families who reach out, parents, media, and I'm happy to ask any off the wall kind of question or nuance around the criminal system. So I'm here for that if you need that kind of guidance or answers, or anyone has that type of information they'd like to bounce off me.
And I'll offer this too for both Katie and for you, because I know that Jim likes it, so I'll do this. But I actually wrote a children's book called Boundaries because there was nothing like it. And if you guys would like, just afterwards, message me or shoot me an email, and I'll send you guys a copy of it.
It's not his only book, so that's a little humble. He wrote a few books already. Was it 3?
I've written 3.
There you go. So
Well,
what he
4th is the one I'm working on with Nikki and Tara.
But what
Wait,
about
Justin, where did that come from? Do you have kids? You were a kid who needed boundaries,
Yeah.
but what evolved into that?
So I have a 5-year-old and little girl, and she basically the Boundaries book. It's so I come from a very toxic, narcissistic family, which here, just to give you a little background on how I got involved with covering Gabby's case. My content, I accidentally went viral several years back talking about toxic families, narcissistic moms, things like that. And when Gabby first went missing, my wife was very glued to her screen watching what was going on. And when the Moab footage came out, she was like, sit your ass down and watch this. And so I did. And I'm watching him, and he is acting the gaslighting, the manipulative speech, the way even his movements are exactly like how my mother would talk and move. And I was like, oh, this directly correlates with my content. Let me cover it. And then it kind of went on, from there, and it's moved into basically a true crime, real crime, current events channel. But one day we were sitting at the table and my daughter said, "Why have I never met your mom?" And before I started trying to trauma dump on my child, I kind of tabled it and I called my therapist the next day and she said, "Well, there's not, how do I explain this to my kid? I need a resource." And she said, "Well, a resource doesn't exist." And so then I called another friend of mine who is a therapist and her partner's a therapist. And I said, I need a resource. They're like, "Yeah, one doesn't exist." So I wrote the resource, had each of those three therapists look at it before it was published to make sure the verbiage was correct. And then we published it from there. And basically what the goal of the book is to do a couple things. One is to teach your kids in a family that they can set boundaries. So like when my daughter and I are playing or doing something or whatever, if she says, "Stop my boundaries," then we don't keep going. We don't say, but we don't make excuses. We immediately stop first time, because that's what we're trying to accomplish, is let her know that saying no one time, it should be all it takes. The other thing that the book does is it teaches what a conditional relationship is, or touches on what a conditional relationship is, so that they can hopefully avoid it. And it also teaches them that boundaries still exist with love.
I have like 5 things to respond to. May I? So
hold on. So real quick. Yeah, absolutely. And this is what it looks like, by the way. And that's based off my little girl.
Love it.
So.
I love it. So I have a couple comments and then have a connection directly to Gabby's story about what you just said. Whether you may have already identified it, I don't know. One, I love that my experience in life has been to solve problems, and I, like you, did not know certain things didn't exist. I became a prosecutor in the early 2000s. I kind of thought problems were solved. I was there to enforce the law. Very early on in my career, not intending to be involved in domestic violence, I thought I would do trafficking, child abuse. I got put in our domestic violence court and almost immediately learned, oh my gosh, no one knows what they're doing. And here I am, 24 years old. Like, are you serious? And I'm a curious person. I love to read. I know smarter people than me, and I like to talk. And I, for the last 20 years, have continued to try to learn. And with your book, The Boundaries, I created a tool for first responders to solve the problem that happened in Gabby's case, because as a prosecutor, laws have been passing all across the country the last 20 years to deal with particular types of physical violence, and no one had really solved it. They had passed laws, but that didn't change how officers knew what to do, or survivors' ability to identify or put a word or language to the act that they experienced. And it ultimately led to me creating a tool for our officers here in Austin, and it solved all the problems. So, right, Justin, I imagine you can't go spend 20 hours talking to every person who says, "Oh my gosh, I have that same experience with boundaries." Just like Nikki and Jim, there is zero chance that they can respond to the thousands of emails they're getting. However, they want to get the message out. You want to get the message out. I want to get the message out. So creating tools and resources like books, like this TikTok conversation, are so crucial. As soon as I created that form and made it available, it literally has solved that problem in thousands of agencies across America. The other thing is with teenage kids and talking about boundaries and realizing I never knew what that word was. What I love about what you said is she says it once, right? That creates a clear line. And the issue with something like domestic violence and these areas, gender-based crime, all of these nuances, is it becomes a line of confusion for people. Like, oh, maybe he didn't understand. Maybe she didn't understand. And it is difficult for parents who are not experts in this area and everyone to be able to identify something as bad. And I think you could hear that in the footage with Moab, where
Absolutely.
Frankly, they seem like they're trying. Right? I have seen much worse. I have seen different experiences with officers that are much worse than that. However, he had no idea what to do. You heard judgments throughout it. And the problem is he had no clear direction. So he's relying on his wife's anxiety and this, and he's not looking at the problem. And the problem was he didn't even recognize Gabby was a victim. Couldn't even see it. It was right in front of him. And that is what led to kind of the procession of events that could have been an easy solution if he had been able to identify her as a victim and literally give her the card to any shelter or advocacy organization who for free she could have talked to that night. Instead, he got to go to the hotel. And so that one word, simplicity of a boundary, she says, no, I hear that. I don't question it. I don't push back. We just identify a boundary is such a tangible solution. That is a wonderful lesson that I am now going to go implement with my kids. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And and she actually came up with saying, stop my boundaries, and she'll just say my boundaries. And I love that she does that because it's a clear line of demarcation with that.
100%. There's no blurriness. There's no nothing. If you were confused, like, here's my word. So I love that. I would love to see the book. I look forward, and I have like fun swag I'd love to send you because I so appreciate you doing that.
Absolutely. We can, and I have 2 others that I'm sold out of right now. And I will tell anybody, if you do want that book, because I am trying to clear this out because I don't know what's going to happen with TikTok. I dropped them down to my cost, basically, and you can get them on TikTok Shop.
And I happily pay for it because
I'll send it to you. You don't have to. I'll send it to you. You're doing work. That's fine. But I'm just saying, like, if people listening want it for their kids, you can do that.
Absolutely.
But that's where the lethality assessment comes into play, which is stuff that we took part in Utah and down here in Florida. A lethality assessment is another tool you can use when 911 is called.
Well, and on Gabby's the foundation website, there's a link, and if it's not up right now, it's on our website and will be on theirs tomorrow. Because the thing about lethality assessments is, right, it's based on evidence-based factors, but the truth is not everyone is going to take that step. Katie, I'd love you to share this kind of barrier I didn't know about with survivors, but to be able to assess your own danger, that's what's kind of amazing about domestic violence. And that is, it is preventable because it is predictable, because it is patterned. And so part of the danger assessments help you identify those risk factors, and then we can prevent the ultimate outcome that Nikki and Jim and everyone has experienced. And so it's not just the lethality assessment. There are things specifically developed for law enforcement. There is something that we put up on the website that specifically allows survivors to do that assessment themselves if they're unable to reach out to an agency. And I think that is the overarching issue tonight as people are reaching out to Nikki and Jim, going to their website, identifying they've been abused. And unfortunately, people give well-intended but bad advice that puts victims in danger, and that is just to leave. And so they have really prioritized the safety of survivors in the process of leaving. And that information is on both websites. And I think we just really hope that anyone, a friend, family, or survivor who is in that immediate crisis can access that tonight without having to wait for somebody to respond to an email. Because unfortunately, that tends to be where advice goes wrong and can result in fatal outcomes.
By the way, Kelsey, I did not introduce you to Joe. He's here. Neither one of your faces are on the screen, but
I tried. I even put on makeup.
Gabby's dad, Joe, is here with us. Is Tara there with you, Joe, or no?
No, she's in the other room, and I'm sitting outside in the dark.
Okay.
Hi, Joe.
What wants to do?
Well, yeah. So I just wanted to introduce you. She's one of our new partners, Joe. So she'll be.
No, it's great because I love trying to figure out what we can do to make the changes, right? Because that's important to me. Because doing the same thing today and expecting a different result tomorrow just doesn't make a lot of sense, right?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, yeah. I mean, you have the Maryland Network, which is their lethality assessment. You have what's the Appraise program, but that's a longer assessment. You know what I mean? That they actually get those answers to, and they read those answers back, and that's what's really the informative part because they see how they answered and whatnot. So I understand all that. Mm-hmm. I like the lethality assessment for the officers to teach them to spot those differences and make sure that everybody gets access to the resources because a lot of people don't know where to even go or where to begin to go when they're in that situation. And having someone give you that phone number is important.
Well, and that is what, it is difficult. I train officers. I don't even know how many thousands of officers. And the issue is we ask officers to do a lot. And while I think these officers could have done better, and that's its own entire like 50-hour conversation, the truth is sometimes they need simple answers. And what I love about any of the lethality assessments is not really the name of the item, it is the indicators that are tangible inside of it. If you are pregnant, you're at higher risk. If he is unemployed, you're at higher risk. If he has attempted or threatened to commit suicide, you're at higher risk. It's these things that the officers themselves don't even need to fully understand, but are tangible things that if they see, if she has a packed bag, if she's about to separate, these are the things that we need to identify. This could lead to something really bad. And so we need ideally to connect them with an advocate. And they're actually, just like the lethality assessment is based on the danger assessment, which is research and evidence-based. And there is a specific one that's been developed for law enforcement. And it makes it so it's more consumable to a patrol officer. I think that's on the website as well. But, you know, Joe, I think that the incorporation and conversation, when Justin, you asked what are things we can tell parents to do, that's a really, just like I train officers, like I would love them to understand everything. But in the end, if I can give you 10 things that when you see it, you go, oh my gosh, that's that thing. And you call an advocate, you call me, you call someone else. That's kind of like that game of telephone. We don't want the message of danger to be diluted. So if we can identify the touch points like a patrol officer in this case, if he had attended a training I've done, he would have looked at that guy's injuries on his face and known exactly what had happened to Gabby. But he didn't, because no one gave him that quick cheat sheet. If they had understood how victims respond and interact with law enforcement, they would have picked up on the fact that they should have just given her access to the shelter, to an advocate, who that advocate could have done the right safety planning, even if they didn't know how to do it, which obviously they didn't. And so the conversation, just bringing to light what lethality indicators are, is so important, Joe. So I'm so glad y'all have focused on that. But just sharing what those things are so people can identify it, it's actually quite easy because they're tangible things. Has your boyfriend ever said he's going to kill himself? Well, yeah. You know why? Because he doesn't want you to leave, and it's a tactic. Great. That's the thing we need to pay attention to. Are you pregnant? You need to be concerned. We need to make sure that you are protected during that time. Is he unemployed? You know, there are so many things that track this particular case that the one thing I feel like the documentary didn't do was, like, I think they did a wonderful job showing the progression without the language often attached to it, which is important because you've taught your daughter the word boundaries, but not everyone knows what that means, how to do it, all that stuff. So I felt like the documentary, it did a really good job showing what the experience is. And I think this is now an opportunity to connect that with tangibles. Like, yes, you feel like you can relate. It's because that's an actual evidence-based thing that predicts the future of your fate, and you can do something about it. And Katie's brought up a really important thing to me in the past about the limits for survivors to be able to connect with those resources.
So real quick, because TikTok is a challenging platform, we'll call it. Apparently, something that you said triggered it. And
I tried to go over this earlier.
And I'm reading a pop-up that basically said, I'll tell you what it says, so I'll tell you what we need to do to fix it, because it's a very easy fix. And it says, it's asking me if I want to remove you. And it says, the uncooperative live content contains themes that some may find uncomfortable. If they remain in your live will be unavailable to some audiences. So what I'm going to do, if you're okay with it, is I will hit its button to remove so we don't lose that. And if you want to come right back, we'll just continue on.
Okay. And then I will do my best to use Pig Latin.
I know it's very hard because
I get the intent.
Yeah, but that's another 50-hour conversation.
I know, we'll talk about that later. I'll move out. Maybe Katie.
Okay, I'll do that real quick, and then just come back. So TikTok's fun, isn't it, guys? On how it works.
Sorry, we were trying to talk about that before. It's so hard to talk about.
And the thing is, what she said was just like was fine. I think I know what word it was. It was the KILL.
Right.
Word, but still, it's too sensitive. Now, Rose, I know that you're like asleep over there. Is there anything you want to say? Because I know it's getting late for you. Are you just passed out?
She's snoring away right now.
No, she's
Oh.
right.
She's muted. There she goes.
I had to mute myself. I'm all staticky. I'm all no.
It's actually better now.
I'm upstairs now. So I don't know, maybe that was like just what needed to happen.
Well,
No, I can't just speak like randomly.
I can speak randomly.
No, I can't just speak like randomly.
I can speak randomly.
No, I can't just speak like randomly.
There we go. I think that was it. You're good now.
I think that was Gabby again.
I think what happened was
I think that was Gabby again.
it's uncooperative. I'm going to mute you on Clark because I think it's yours. I think it's uncooperatives right now. When she came back,
It's being uncooperative.
Yeah, you might need to leave and come back again to try to fix that. But you can unmute Rose real quick. You got TikTok is TikTok, guys. TikTok is TikTok. I'm gonna invite you to unmute. Okay, so I'm not you can talk about whatever you want. I'm not asking you to like speak randomly, but I just figured if people had questions or if there was anything specific you wanted to say, because you usually are pretty talkative. As you said, even yourself in the documentary, I think this is the first time I've ever been speechless. You always, Rose, have something to say.
I know.
He's right.
Okay, guys. I know I'm I'm a talkative person. I just like my brain's gone blank. I'm old, Justin. It's
Rose
late.
told me something interesting before.
Is it because you're cold?
God, it's so cold. It's
It's cold.
snowing.
She has
Snowing actively.
It snowed.
I
It'll be
get
What was it, Nikki? What did I say? What was cool? What was interesting?
It was weird because I didn't realize it until she said it. But she said people tell her she has a Billie Eilish vibe. Like,
Well, she doesn't know how to do the split screens though. So I don't know if she's got that tech stuff down.
I don't have the tech stuff.
Well, I can help her fix that.
Nikki didn't know either, so
Well, I can help Nikki too.
Nikki's old. You're not.
But she's old in spirit, Joe.
It's true. You know what? I'll give you that. I'll give you that one.
Wise.
She's 108 years old.
I thought it was
In dog
106.
years?
This is how quick it goes, Rose.
Oh no,
I can't
I'm
help
just
it.
fading away.
Before the end of this live, you're going to be 111.
Yeah, no, I don't know. Sometimes when I get put on the spot to just like talk, I got nothing.
Well, here I'll give you something real quick as we're kind of at a moment. For anybody who might want to know, the reason that the one next to Rose, Real Victims, that is a new podcast that was just launched with myself and my friend and co-host Dan, who's supposed to be here, but he got himself sick, and so now he's not. But if you guys would like to listen to that, I did put a link to it in my link tree. It's the first one there. But basically, Nikki and Jim and Rose were the guests on the first episode, and I want to be very specific and say not about the documentary. I think the documentary was pretty well done, but about the horrific Lifetime movie. And they basically go over what was fact, what was fiction, and spoiler alerts, most of it was fiction. But still go listen to it to know what happened.
I haven't watched it.
Don't, Joe. Don't watch it.
Yeah.
I only
Wait,
watched
Justin
it for
and
the-
Rose, are y'all so old that you remember the pop-up thing when they'd have music videos and then there'd be commentary that people would write?
Mm-hmm.
Is that like what the podcast incorporates?
No,
Like
it's not pop-up video.
nonstop?
No, because you can't really do pop-up video type stuff with a podcast. It's you play it will be on YouTube at some point. There's a copyright thing they're trying to get through right now. But on you're listening to it, you're streaming it. You can hear the scenes. They play those live, and then they we describe what the scenes are for the most part, and then they kind of talk about what's fact, what's fiction. Because what you have to remember with that movie is that Lifetime never reached out to any of them.
Oh, I'm familiar with how that strategy. As a person coming in blind, I'm curious about what's different about Real Victims than other podcasts. So you seem busy. What made you want to do this?
Well, Dan is part of it. We kind of floated a bunch of different things around it, but there is not really a podcast out there that takes people who are involved in these cases and has them basically decipher the movies made about them. And Dan himself is a Hollywood director, producer, something. What else? I don't know what else. He does a lot of stuff. There's a whole bunch of Emmys behind him when you talk to him.
Dan doesn't live a real life.
Yeah, he doesn't live a real life. Like you call him and you're like, he's like, oh man, sorry. He's in here now too, I'm sure. And he'll be like, I'm sorry, I didn't miss your call. I was with Ringo Starr and Peter Frampton and Paul McCartney. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's normal.
Yeah.
And so that's just, but there he is. He's right there. But he's awesome. He knows a lot of people there, and he also one thing about Dan that I will say, what I love about him is not only is he a very interesting human being, he's a very caring person. He's a very genuine person. The reason that I met him, or the way that I met him, was very, I would say almost kismet. He was with another creator in Nashville when Riley Strain went missing.
Mm-hmm.
And by happenstance, he was getting ready to go. I think you were getting ready to fly to the UK to go meet up with Johnny Depp for Hollywood Vampires. And I had not said a word to him before.
No comment.
Huh? Do what?
Just the Johnny Depp. I'll step aside from that for today.
And there's Johnny right there, signed.
Okay.
But basically, he said he's going to meet him for Hollywood Vampires. Like, oh, my friend, my best friend works for Alice Cooper. He's his assistant. And Dan's like, oh, Kyler? And I'm like, yeah. And so then we called Kyler, who almost never answers his phone. And I gave it to Dan, and it became a whole thing. And then we've been friends ever since.
Okay.
I was in Vegas doing a domestic violence workshop, and Dan was like, we're doing a podcast, come do it. And I was like, okay. So,
He said, we'll come to Vegas.
Yeah. Well, who doesn't want to go to Vegas? Is Brittany still there?
Me, I don't.
Yeah, I don't want to go to Vegas either.
Yeah.
Well, and so what about the podcast are you doing? I hear you're incorporating the survivor voice. What are you doing that's different than people who just put out entertainment for podcasts? I think that's such an important conversation. Yeah. It sounds like you're on track with that.
Yeah, well, again, what's very unique about this is it's basically part of the goal is to make Hollywood more responsible. Typically speaking, when you hear a movie or you see a movie, because Lifetime says it was based on true events, it's based on a true story. And the only thing that was true, basically, outside of the stuff that they got like from the Moab footage, was their names. And that was it.
And then they make money off it. They exploit it. They don't actually get the narrative out there.
And they did nothing for the Gabby Petito Foundation in doing so, with the caveat of some bracelets. And it's basically, we invited them because of Dan's connections. It's not like some random person reaching out. It's somebody who does have, a voice in Hollywood, and reaching out to even like Thor Birch and some of the people involved in that. And we were all met with crickets. So we gave them an opportunity to come on and defend it. And even really give Nikki and Jim an opportunity to kind of confront them, and they just chose to not do that despite knowing what our plans were. So part of what we want to do is one, educate people so that, hey, here you can listen to what's true and what's not in these cases, instead of assuming, because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who saw the Gabby Petito story on Lifetime and assumed that a lot of it was true.
Yeah,
most people. I got so many comments about that they were like, oh, I just saw the Lifetime movie, blah, 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 about it being like real. And I'm like, don't watch that. Don't.
Part of the issue is, how do you make this kind of stuff consumable? And Hollywood and entertainment industry has done it by glorifying, not making it educational, thinking it has to either be depressing or exploitive. And the truth is, if there's a way to create some kind of power movement, and I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, so I'm not going to do that. I don't want to get kicked out, but a way to be bad ASS yourself in telling the story and taking that empowerment. Many clients in my experience, I've had to protect from different Hollywood agents, different kinds of platforms wanting to tell their story, but they do it in a way that makes them feel like they're finally going to get heard. And what I know is to never let my clients talk to any of them and never be interviewed, because the narrative is then driven by something like Lifetime, who not only makes money on you, actually tells the wrong story that becomes additionally traumatizing. And also you don't actually change anything.
Yeah, but you guys are looking too far into it. I can appreciate all that. They just wanted to be first.
But they wanted to be first, Joe, to make money off of it.
That's why they wanted to be first. That's it. Don't look past the money. That's exactly what.
And it's also the same as what you're saying, Justin, with wanting to talk about the documentary like right away, because like it's all fresh and out there right now, and we want to get everyone to know. They were like in the same thing, just not for like giving information and helpful information. They were like, hey, this is popular right now. We need to get this out right now.
Well, exactly.
So
But I feel though, like with the documentary, you know, Netflix came and talked to all of you, and you guys made the decision to do the documentary. And you know, in that moment, the response might have been different. But if Lifetime had come to Nikki or Jim or Joe, maybe, you know, and said, hey, we want to tell this story. We're going to donate proceeds from this film to the foundation to help what you're doing, help educate, then the conversation might have been very different. But they didn't even care about that. You know, it's like, you know, not to spoil what you said, Rose, but the stuff that they did with you, that they took from y'all, like you said, it was creepy.
Dude, they gave Jim hair.
I know Joe is very jealous of this.
He made me
Well, then
handsome.
keep in mind,
I can't
even if
argue
they
that.
interviewed
Like, I can't.
them, they would have edited it however they wanted. So to be able to give survivors and families control over what is actually said is something this platform can do, that even if Lifetime had interviewed them, they wouldn't have had that opportunity.
Yeah, and that's part of also the goal of the podcast, is it allowed the three of them that were on it to talk about what was fact, what was fiction, what was true, what wasn't true, and empower them to be like, this is basically just BS, and here's the reasons why. And the couple parts that they did get correct, which you guys all admitted, that like when they did stuff on the Moab footage, they got that done pretty well, because they had something that they could study. But everything else, for the most part, was, you know, they made up a lot. They just pulled it out of their butts.
I just gotta say this, Katie. You sit very still.
She's very quiet.
She sits very, like, the only reason I know her camera's even on is because she blinks every once in a blue moon.
Well, I'd love her to introduce herself, because she
Katie.
plays so many connections to the conversations we're having.
I think I did when you were out, Kelsey. But I don't know if it's like the teacher in me when I teach special needs. Sometimes I have to ignore behaviors and I pretend nothing's going on. So I think maybe got a lot of practice. And
What are you saying about us, Katie?
I know exactly what you're saying about us, Justin.
I do know what she's saying. I have to ignore the bad behavior. Okay, thanks.
Katie, is there anything that you, I don't want to put you on the spot, anything that you want to share about your experiences that have to be a good teaching tool, like, you know, for anybody listening out there, or maybe you don't know what's going on?
Yes, and I'll actually say this is something that was brought to my attention recently, that it was profound to another survivor. So I think this would be good to share, especially when you guys were talking about the parent conversation. One thing that was really hard for me when answering questions about my assault is answering questions about my partner and answering questions about my assaulter, because they felt like two different people. But even just based on the question, like back to back, I felt like one question I was answering like as a defending my partner, because that's the person I love. But then the next question I was answering is the person that just attacked me, about the person that just attacked me. And so I think whenever you're interacting with a survivor or trying to help them, also recognize that they are going through that in their head when they're talking to you, of if it doesn't make sense, it's because it doesn't. And we're trying to defend somebody we love and also get help from away from this person at the same time. And sometimes it does feel like they're two separate people, even though they are that one person.
It's confusing, I'm sure.
It is.
Yeah.
And for me, that lasted for weeks. Even out of the fact, for me, I left that night the first time. And so even with it being that one incident, I still had trouble figuring out that they were in fact the same person. And so just trying to keep that in mind when you're going through survivor, figuring out what their next steps are, I think is really important, and figuring out how to get them safe.
Left on the first try, that's not common. Usually, what is it, 7 times? Typically, so first time, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, and that statistic is a little bit debated, I would say. But yeah, I mean, I think for me also, because it was such a severe assault the first time, it was helpful in that it was a very clear decision of what I needed to do.
And yet, And yet, Katie, if you look back before the assault, so many people define things by an act of violence. And I see some questions in the comments just to clarify. That was the first act of violence, but were there signs of abuse that could have been identified that now you've learned about?
Yeah, and I there, verbal abuse was there, and I knew that's what it was. However, I am very strong in my faith, and so I turned to this verse in 2 Corinthians that was, those married to an unbeliever stay married in hopes that they come to faith. And so I had just kept praying. I knew I wouldn't have children with this man, but I thought maybe one day God will restore his heart. And I just never thought it would get to the point of it being physical until it did. And I think the fact that I was moved out to across the country from the East Coast to the West Coast, that I had quit my job, and that I was away from all my family, are all signs that you don't know are signs until they become dangerous. Because at the time it was exciting, it was fun, and it was a great thing, until it wasn't.
So, Katie, that's an important point. Is you're saying there was one incident and you left. There was one physical
incident, yes.
Tremendous physical incident, but
Yes.
there was a lot of coercive control leading up to that. So that's
In isolation, which is an identifier that is easy, what seems good, which seems romantic. But when they're saying, let's go on a trip, let's move away, let's go do that, let's go have the experience, that's actually something that should be alarming. That it sounded from you watching the documentary, Nikki, that like you had that instinct, like they're taking her away. And in fact, that was right.
Or there's even things I didn't realize that were something that I even recognized that was identified. Like, he would tell me if I didn't come to bed right now to go to sleep, like I couldn't come in the bedroom at all. I had to sleep on the couch. And so like things like controlling like your sleep patterns. And that's when I was studying for school. So controlling whether or not you can do your schoolwork, those types of things are also evidence that I didn't realize would escalate to the point that it did.
Mm-hmm.
One thing too that I noticed, and I talked about this with Jim earlier, that I hadn't really noticed prior to the newest documentary, because you all shared some additional text messages and letters that weren't previously shared. And what I noticed was he destroyed her self-esteem and her confidence, because she would say things like in the videos, like, I don't deserve his love. I don't, and based on anything else that you've seen, and even the conversations I've had with y'all and even with Jim today, I didn't know Gabby, but it seems that there was confidence there in her abilities and what she could do. And he just whittled that away, which is another one of those tactics to make somebody stay with him because, oh, I need to stay with him because I'm not worthy of getting somebody else. And it seems like that's something that he did to her as well. And I would imagine, Katie, that's something you experienced too. Sorry, Nikki, go ahead.
Right, Katie, like the whole point is for them to gain so much control that you can only depend on them and you need them and only them. So that's why they're breaking you down.
Yeah, and I think they would just use the almost like to me, I in my head I call it like the whiplash effect. Like it was like, you don't need to have a job. I take care of all the bills. I had this remote job that I would do, but then the next day it would be like, you don't contribute to the house. Like you need to be contributing more. I do everything for you, and so it was like one day quit the job, the next day you need to be making more money, but then I'm not going to let you do your schoolwork to help you advance your career. So those types of things also like continuously tear you apart because you're constantly questioning what the decision you need to make is.
And I think you see that in the documentary itself with that conversation, the text messages at the Mexican restaurant where Gabby, who is obviously a very confident woman, has a supportive environment, says like, okay, if you don't want to do this vlog, I can be successful on my own. And that is kind of that final message to an abuser, like, I don't need you. And, which in a way I love, in that it is clear that she had strength and autonomy and instinct to do that. But to Katie's point is that's kind of like whiplash, whether she understood that or knew that or not.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing, Katie.
Yeah. I know it's hard to speak up on that kind of stuff. So
absolutely. I mean, I think it's important, especially when Kelsey brought up how victims need to find their own way of justice. I mean, this happened in January of 23, and the assault trial is still not scheduled until July of 25. So it's been 2.5 years, and it's still not over. So you have to find a way to help and share and move on without the justice system, because that's not where the justice lies.
And my guess is the justice system will probably just give us.
So, Katie, where in your mind, for you, where does your justice lie?
Making sure that this happens to as few women as possible, especially by my abuser specifically, going forward. And that's why I've shared, there is on my page a playlist called What Changed My Life, or How My Life Changed. And it goes through a bunch of videos. I would say proceed with caution if you are triggered by verbal abuse, of a lot of the videos I had of him screaming at me, and how it escalated to the point that it did, to the physical. And I think, as someone who married a man that didn't drink at the time, we waited till marriage, we did Bible study together every night. It really truly can happen to the least suspecting. And I think that as someone who felt like I had done everything right, it really still can be you. We had no domestic violence in my family previously, and I don't want anybody to be surprised when they've never heard of it, because it really can be anybody.
Let me ask you this, because there's 1,600 people in here, and looking back with you having the gift of hindsight, what are some signs that, for anybody who might be in a situation like what you were, and I know that every case is different, but what are some signs that when you look back and you're like, man, early on, this should have been a red flag. What are some, sorry, not to put you on the spot with that, but like, what are some of the things that when you look back, that you would tell your younger self if you had a chance, like, this is a sign that you need to get out?
I think being screamed at for any reason, and especially when you're saying, hey, like, stop, leave me alone, there's no reason for the conversation to continue. I think the conversation with your daughter about boundaries is something similar I was doing at the time of, leave me alone, I don't want to talk about this right now. And I think recognizing that if they're not respecting those things with a verbal altercation, then how could that translate into a physical one down the road? I think that would be the big things for me. And also wanting to rush things, wanting to go to the next phase of the relationship quickly, for any reason. I think at the time, there were a lot of factors that contributed to that for me, but I think there's never harm in waiting for the next phase of the relationship, and it's okay to continue to take your time.
I think that's good. That's good advice.
Justin, I saw someone just put in the comments a conversation that we can highlight later, but I just want to answer it briefly and then can refer to resources. But that's about reactive abuse, and that's something I know is present in Gabby's case and is common, because in order to survive, we fight back, particularly when we experience very terrifying types of abuse. And I just want to put it out there, since someone asked, is in terms of direct representation, all I do now is represent women who have had to fight back. And in Gabby's case, I think it's such a tangible opportunity for people to identify that she did try to fight back, and the Moab Police Department couldn't even identify those injuries on his bodies as what she did to survive herself and what she did to fight back. And instead, that's what turned her into a defendant or a suspect and prevented her from getting those resources. So I wanted to make sure we just address that, and I can circle back. Whoever wrote that comment, you can reach out, but it's certainly a very important conversation going forward, because women don't get represented well when they fight back. And unfortunately, while Gabby, obviously the word is not lucky, but while she did not get arrested, I almost wish she had, because she may have been able to get more resources than she did in that moment.
No,
Kelsey, I was talking to Justin, right? We had this conversation the other day. We don't like that word, reactive abuse.
I was literally about to talk about that. What would we decide? Yeah. Survivor's response.
I was like, is there another term we could use, like survivor response or something else? Have you heard any other terms? Because I just don't. I feel like people
It's
abuse.
a confusing term, I think.
Well, there's different terms for violence and different terms for abuse that are evidence-based and used in the work. And there are different kinds of violence. And there is like violence to control, which is what we see abusers use. And then there is defensive use of force. You know, I like to call like use of force. And that is like what people know as, quote, self-defense. So if something is happening and you're fighting back. What reactive abuse is usually specifically addressing is what does make for law enforcement. And if you look at the incident, if you're only looking at violence, it is something they could get arrested for, because like under the law, self-defense requires that you are defending yourself from an equal amount of force. So reactive abuse is a nuance and important because they're more likely to get arrested because maybe the other person who is the abuser didn't even instigate abuse. But there are reasons women use violence in a reactive and protective way because they know how to protect themselves and their children. So knowing the kids are about to get home from school, knowing that the abuse or the violence might occur, they sometimes will control that violence to occur at a moment that is safer and protective of their children. So there's a lot of different terminology and violence and all of that. In this case, I think a really important message is it's not really just about the violence, it's about the abuse. And officers in this case didn't even ask about prior violence, but they definitely didn't know how to identify abuse, which is, as Nikki, to your point, acts of coercive control and controlling behavior, isolation, those kind of non-tangible things that aren't well identified, but are red flags and important.
And coercive control is actually becoming, a couple of states are trying to pass bills, right, to make this an effect.
You know, there are, but like other things, if people don't know what it is, it can't get implemented. And my best way of explaining coercive control is we have all, who are parents, coercively controlled someone, and that is how we get our kids to do our chores. My kids don't like to empty the dishwasher. Justin, I don't know if the boundaries thing has helped. Maybe you can do another book about how to make kids do chores. But in the end, we do two things. When they don't listen, we threaten them or we promise them things. And that is what coercive control is. We compel people to do things they don't want to do. And we use threats and promises. And unfortunately, we can pass laws, but if law enforcement doesn't even know what that means, it's hard to implement them.
Well, I think that's a good segue to talking about that, because I know I'd asked Joe earlier about this, and talking about what the foundation's been doing. What are, since everything's happened, talk about the laws that you guys have gotten changed. But I think that that's a good discussion, and I think also, if we're having that discussion too, what people can begin to do in their own states to try to help change the way things are handled when it comes to domestic violence, law enforcement response, etc. Not everyone.
You wanted me? Is that what you wanted me to do?
It can be any of y'all.
Well, there's a lot. So you got to start somewhere, and I'm all for, hey, listen, changing the system altogether. But truth be told, I don't care who you are, it's not going to happen. You have to have those small victories to get to the big win. So we could talk about all these laws that we got to change, but what in its simplest form can you change first? Because that's where you have to start. You can't just do it all at once. It's never going to work. You're going to ask for too much stuff. I've seen it happen. So I don't like things being tied to other things. So you can call out certain people when it comes to a domestic violence bill. Hey, listen, why did you go against this? So it really depends on how you can get it. When it comes to domestic violence, I'm for a lethality assessment. I understand there are other programs out there, but in terms of the police, listen, you're not going to get officers to engage in a 20, 30 questionnaire with a victim or an abuser. You can force them to do it, but at some point in time, they're going to start doing it just to check the box. And it's not about checking the box. It's about being passionate about what it is that you're asking somebody. So I do think the lethality assessment's a great tool for officers. And if that's something you want to change in your town, the best way to do it is to call your local leaders and say, hey, listen, here's the blueprint of what you did. So the reason why Florida didn't take the Maryland Network program is because the Maryland Network program's copyrighted. And it was just a money issue. So what they did was they circumvented it by just moving around some words and have a play on words is really what they did. But the way they're going to roll it out and the training they're going to do, it's a great start point. Listen, does it have to be more engaged? Yeah, it does. But let them go off the start, and then you progressively change it. That's throwing it all over at once is. You got to remember who you're asking to do this.
Yeah.
And you said before you're asking them to do too much. The things when it comes to lethality assessment are questions that they already ask anyway, and they all acknowledge that. Listen, when we rolled it out here to the state of Florida, it was the Florida sheriffs, the Florida police chiefs, DCF. I mean, it was all of them. FMLA. I'm sorry, FMLE. Sorry. It was all the officers. It wasn't just, hey, by the way, you're going to do it this way. We got their input, we got their buy-in, and it's going to come out, and we'll take the small victory here. And once they show that progress, we progress even more.
So what's so great about a tool that is simplified with a yes/no answer question checkbox is that they can actually ask the words, right? And then that provides the information, and they can add it up, and they can do what will save the life, which is connect them with resources and advocates to do safety planning.
The Oklahoma study, if you read that, it really highlights how the victims aren't giving the credit to the police officers. The police officers don't get the credit until they see the statistics come out, from the state. That's when they see the credit. The victims give the credit to the advocates, but they would have never got to the advocates if it wasn't for the police, right? So you got to let them know. You got to set the right expectation. Listen, the credit's going to go to the shelters, to the legal aids, to whoever is assisting, these victims, or helping them get to where it is they need to get. Not everybody needs all these resources, but the officers aren't going to see it till 3, 4, 5 years down the line, and that's just a fact.
When
And
I
once they
apologize, to
understand that,
clarify, what I meant is not the credit. I meant to connect them to advocates who then could do safety planning, so that they could leave safely. Or
yeah, and that's what they do, and they're amazing at it. Listen, I'm on a board down here. Jim's on a board. Jim's on the Partnership for Florida. It's all about getting everyone out safely, but you got to have a starting point. And I think a lethality assessment that the cops can, have their buy-in to, I think that's a great start off point.
Well, one of the things about podcasts like this and public conversations about tools like the lethality assessment is people even knowing that that's a thing that exists. It is evidence-based, it's research, it's real. I know in the Gabby Petito Foundation, one of the things they put up today out of concern that people were reaching out for safety was that domestic violence, homicide is pattern, predictable, and preventable. And what Joe's talking about are these things that are evidence-based red flags that we know if we can identify that pattern, we can do something about it and prevent the outcome. And so for those who don't know what those assessments are, that's on their website as well. And so even having a conversation about a tool that your average person doesn't know is really important. So I appreciate that, Joe.
But it's not just law enforcement. Think about if we can get this information into the doctor's hands or nurses' hands, because how often do they see it working at a hospital where they can give this information? There's a right and wrong way to do it. You know what I mean? If a doctor or a nurse suspects something, they're going to get that spouse or significant other out of the room right away, right? So they can ask these questions. But if we can get them the resources and where to go, and it really is going to be a collective effort. That's how we're going to take the 1 in 3 to 1 in 4 or to 1 in 5.
Yeah.
That's how it's going.
Knowing pregnancy is one of those things that identifies high risk. Focusing on OBGYNs, for instance, is a really important aspect to consider. And I created a brochure for my OBGYN when I realized they didn't have anything like that. And so those kind of touch points are so easy and tangible. So that's a great point to put it into the hands of medical providers as well.
It might be worth looking at reaching out to like a medical publication to possibly even do an article on that.
Yep. I don't know if she's on now, but I have a colleague and a friend and an ally who is present on social media, and she does a lot of women's health stuff. So I'd love to connect you guys, and maybe you guys can do a podcast together.
Yeah, I think that would be.
Joe, I was just saw it too. There's some 911 dispatch agencies out there that are now instituting the DA5, the Danger Assessment 5, and they're asking 5 questions at the time they call 911. And they're getting that, basically that same training to be able to find out that lethality right from the time and relay that information to the responding officers. So they're well aware of it. Hopefully, if they answer the questions, that it's already triggering that level of lethality before they even arrive on scene. So, and then they go into the lethality assessment on scene.
Yeah, it's just I see. Listen, the one thing I'll tell you is that I believe Gabby's story started a larger conversation. That it's no longer in the shadows. It's no longer hidden when it comes to domestic violence. At least I believe so, from the way I see people talk about it now.
100%. You're all right.
So when you see things like that, I mean, there was a case. It was down here in Florida. A woman had called 911, acting like she was ordering pizza. They ended up finding out where she was and ended up saving her life because she was being beaten. So. Yeah, I do think officers are starting to be more, attuned to what happens. I think a lot of them are using Gabby's video for a learning tool, and that's really why we did the documentary and we're pushing the stories out the way we are. Is we don't want there to be anyone else like Gabby, that ends up that way.
Well, with Gabby, with the Moab police footage, it puts it right in front of their face. I've trained probably over 100,000 police officers, and to have that footage right in front of them and to watch what they have been trained to identify, and although the intentions may have been good, they didn't pick up on some of those signs, I think is a really powerful message, this documentary. And that footage, while I'm sure it's painful to watch, is probably one of those things that is worth it because it has forced law enforcement and first responders to confront some of the things they didn't even realize they were doing wrong.
One thing that I think it was Kentucky that did this, when it came to domestic violence calls, it got to a point where a social worker had to go out because they were going to be more trained to kind of spot those signs and things like that. And I forget, I'd have to look up the stats. And so I'm pulling this just out of kind of memory here, and I could be a little off, so don't hold me to it. But they were able to, by employing like 1 or 2 social workers, they were able to it was a small town in Kentucky, able to save the police department something like $4 million a year, because a lot of the repeat calls, one of the biggest things that they do, and I mean, Jim, you were a first responder, so you probably know some of this, is those DV calls. If you get that call once, you're going to continue to get that call. And having a social worker in place it was mandated that if this is a DV call, please go out there and make sure everybody's safe, but you wait. You keep them separated till a social worker can arrive, and that ended a lot of those repeat calls by having somebody who was properly trained to kind of deal with it. And I think that's part of a bigger conversation that a lot of these law enforcement divisions in states, cities, municipalities should be having. Take a look at what they did in Kentucky, that it worked, and something that simple could make
it's like an efficiency. So to clarify one thing, that is something that a lot of not a lot, but many departments and communities have put together. And it's not so much that they make an advocate go to the scene because there's a lot of dangers associated with it, but it is to use a tool like the lethality assessment that is a scoring factor, that when the officer asks those questions, they immediately get the survivor on a call with an advocate to do safety planning while the officers are at the scene doing an investigation. And so it kind of fills both buckets. And although law enforcement is often resistant to hand over any control in the investigation, having that divide and conquer approach is so valuable because they can focus on investigation and an advocate can focus on saving her life and safety. But right at the scene.
And we're all kind of just play a little devil's advocate here. If you had that happen, for example, in Moab with Gabby's case, they could have heard the emotion in her voice, but they couldn't see the body language. Whereas if you had somebody go out there, they can witness that body. And again, this is a smaller.
Yeah, no, I like your pushback. But Justin, I will tell you, an advocate, people like me and advocates I work with wouldn't need to see her in person. And there's so many safety concerns about getting them there. I can promise you 90% of advocates who have training don't need to be there, they can get on a phone call, because there's also going to be a resource issue. The number of calls that you get in DV, step one is you just need the officer to identify it, and then they can pass the torch on the safety planning on a hotline, which allows for the overwhelming under-resourced staffing, even at the hotlines tonight, to be able to get that life-saving measure, and doesn't put advocates in danger. I find law enforcement doesn't want to bring the advocates into, quote, the investigation. They get defensive about that. But, you know, there's this whole theory like, oh, something bad happened, call 911, police will fix it. And there's a role that they play. But the other conversation is, let's first save her life, and a conviction is second to that. And I've actually found many officers over the last couple of years that I've shifted that conversation and training to proving, investigating, and convicting to saving her life. And I have seen that their happiness and realization that they can consider it an achievement to save her life. It has changed their attitude in wanting to be a domestic violence detective, which none of them want to be. Yeah. When they realize that they can go home happy having saved someone's life without it being totally connected to the criminal system itself, but connecting her to safety.
I think as someone that had only police respond, I just wanted a woman there. I mean, it could have been a police officer, it could have been an advocate, it could have been a social worker, but I think if there's a DV call, especially by the woman, it would have been helpful to have another woman on the scene. Because being surrounded by a bunch of men after you were assaulted by one is not the most ideal situation to be in, even if they are there to help.
So, a lot of sense.
And, you know, traditionally advocates are women. And so it kind of starts to work that boundary. And when law enforcement sees an advocate do it right, they learn from that and they change their behavior.
I think this brings up like a really good conversation too, because when we started the foundation, we work into different areas, missing persons and DV. And sometimes they cross over, they go hand in hand. And I remember saying to some DV experts, like, I'm like, yeah, I probably shouldn't be a person out there speaking about DV because I'm a man. And she was like, actually, you're wrong. She was like, we need more men to start speaking up. And, you know, that's a big problem. You know, women have been fighting this battle for decades with little to no support from men. But when are men going to step up and calling each other out on what they're doing and teaching them how to be better and teaching our young men how to be better? And I kind of took that to heart, and I really started to think about it. And that's why, like, in my mind, I think about what do we need to do? Like, yeah, we're teaching people about red flags, but let's teach them to not be the abuser. Let's teach them to be more respectful.
Yeah.
And if you can't teach them not to be an abuser, which is a whole nother conversation, you can teach how to hold them accountable as men.
How to hold them accountable.
Yeah, and sometimes that is, as a man telling another man, that's not okay. And,
you know, I use a story. It just happened to us. We were on vacation on a cruise with my family and our 16-year-old, and she wasn't feeling well, and she woke up a little bit later in the day. It was like nighttime. She wanted to go and get something to eat, so I didn't want her walking by herself. So I'm like, I'll take you down to a little restaurant. And while she was there, it wasn't not a lot of people there, but there was 3 men, obviously intoxicated, playing pool. And she walked by them to go use the bathroom, and this one man turned around and made the most lewd and disgusting comment to my 16-year-old daughter. And I guess it's better for him that he got, and me, that he got me at this stage of my life where I'm a little bit more mature, because younger Jim probably would have had a much different reaction. And so I waited for my daughter to get out of the bathroom, and I said, did he say this to you? And she said, yes, he did. And she did what a lot of women sometimes just automatically do. They fawn. It's fine. Don't worry about it. And I'm like, no, it's not fine. I was like, that's not okay. That's not right. That's disrespectful. You should have never experienced that. Should have never said those words. And I just asked her to sit there for a moment. And I went over and I approached the gentleman. And I confronted him on it. And he was very apologetic. I didn't know she was 16. And I said, you know what? It doesn't matter if she's 16, 26, or 46. I'm like, no woman wants to hear those words come out of a person's mouth directly towards them. That's disgusting. I said, I see a wedding band on your finger. You probably got a wife. I said, you wouldn't want anybody to speak to her like that. Your mother, sister, anybody. And I said, you know what makes me even more upset about it I said, the two individuals, you guys standing right here, your two friends who shot you a look after you made that comment and you knew he was wrong, and you had an opportunity to say something to your friend to put him in his place, and you didn't do it. You two need to do better as men and need to start calling each other out if you're a true friend when they do something like that. And I said, it's absolutely appalling. And then I made the individual come over. I said, you're only going to say a couple of words to my daughter, and it's, I'm sorry, and then you're going to walk away. And obviously my daughter, 16, was extremely embarrassed. But he went over and he said, I'm sorry. And he tried to say something else. And I said, no, now you can leave and you can go back. And I want you to wake up in the morning and think about what you did and maybe be a better version of yourself in the morning. And he just walked away. And I'm like, I can't stand for that like anymore. You know, and I worked in a firehouse for 20 plus years, and I get, you know, guy talk and stuff like that. But you know what? Enough is enough. Be respectful.
You know, it's this app has really, my wife has enlightened me to a lot of things, but so has this app, you know. So I think something like 85% of my followers are women, and with 1.6 million people, that's, you know, well over a million of them. And, you know, this app has taught me to be, I mean, I never spoke like that. My mom is a very problematic individual, but I was primarily raised by a single mom who was a very strong woman who, you know, was a dominating force in male dominated fields at the time, things like that. And so I have a very high respect for, you know, for women, but, you know, like my wife, there's a lot of things as men that we get to take advantage of, right? Like I can leave my house right now and go anywhere and I don't have to worry about it. I can go take a walk in the neighborhood at midnight and I don't have to worry about anything, you know, but my wife won't go out after dark and take a walk, even in a very safe neighborhood. In fact, when we first moved to Tennessee, the first neighborhood that we lived in, she would take walks. Typically, I was traveling for work a lot. And so she would take walks around the neighborhood, go down to the lake, turn back and come. And there was a guy who kept like trying to get her to get in his car, like would circle back around, things like that. And that was one of the reasons why, you know, we ultimately decided to leave that neighborhood, was because of that. And then, you know, because of this too, you know, I saw this on here and somebody said, you know, like if you're a guy and you're walking down the street, you know, and you're long distance, whatever, behind women, cross the street. Like it doesn't mean that you're going to do anything, but it might make them feel more comfortable. So last time I was somewhere, like I think it was Chicago, I was in Chicago. I was by myself for work. I was going to get some food, and there were these two young women ahead of me. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want them to be uncomfortable. So I crossed the street. And I think that those are some of the things that men need to learn or hear, at least from us, like, hey, you know, be considerate, because this is the stuff that they have to worry about literally constantly. And
Justin, that's where the boundary word becomes a clear line that men and women can learn to say and learn to hear. Because what Jim just said, if we could just make that a PSA announcement in and of itself and give men and dads and brothers and fathers those words to say, this is what we call bystander intervention and this is how we protect women. You don't have to understand everything about DV, because if women felt that protected by men, we wouldn't have to appease and survive, because we'd have all the other men to protect us. And that's kind of what you've done with that boundaries conversation. The conversation about fear and gender is what I think you're touching on, and has been one of the most tangible things officers can understand, because they are men. And that is how women feel fear differently than men. And you can really ask one question. And that is, as men, go home and ask your wife, how do they hold their keys when they walk to their car at night from the grocery store? And they hold it like a shank. And then you ask a man, how do you hold your keys? And they don't. And that is kind of the privilege of getting to be a man 100%. And not a target of these crimes. And just that awareness changes behavior. And so that's, I mean, Jen, that was just beautifully said. And everyone wishes they had you and a man around them like you.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. There's more though, but the thing is, the issue is too, is while there are a lot of, I want to say that there are more good men than there are bad men, but the issue is that you never know which ones are good until it, you know what I'm saying? You don't know which ones are, or maybe I should say it this way. You don't know which ones are always bad until it's too late. And that's why there's that problem of, you know, like why you choose the bear, or it's what I like to say, it's all men until it's no man, because you just don't know.
Yeah. Well, the good news is it is the majority of men, which means if we can stop the minority of men, we can solve this problem. We don't have to address all men. We can just fix a few men who have multiple victims. And then we change the culture as well as save women.
And I'll say this too, and I hate that it's this way, but Jim, you know, Jim and Joe especially, you know, listen to this. men have to be the ones that call men like that out, because if they're a man that treats a woman that way, they don't respect what a woman says anyways.
Yep.
That's just how it is. And Katie, it looks like you want to say something, and I know you're just being quiet over there, but if you have something, please interject.
Yeah, I saw someone ask earlier about my view on men now and if I feel safe around men as I used to. And I would say that it's not so much about that I feel more dangerous. I feel like that that veil of naivety was ripped away and I finally can just see it for what it is. And how unsafe the world is for women, especially because in my situation, the person responsible for keeping me safe was the person responsible for putting me in the most danger. And you don't realize how real that is until you're in that situation. And so now that I have been there and I wasn't fearful of this person that was supposed to take care of me for the rest of my life, I'm going to be 10 times more fearful of that stranger on the street because I don't even know them at all. And so having to kind of grapple with that new reality has been interesting. And I think someone asked earlier, I've not dated since then. It's over 2 years. And that's just because of me being not sure of how to proceed in that aspect of my life. And so I think it's a veil that gets ripped away from you at some point as a woman. And it stinks that you have to have that point of view, but I think that it will protect you. And the earlier you can get that realization, the safer you will be.
I think we're talking about protection and things like that, Jim. I think that this is a good segue. Every time you give stats, even if I've heard them before, my mind is always blown. So do you want to go through and kind of talk about some of the statistics, like the one even about strangling in particular? Just every time you say it blows the 700%.
Yeah, I mean,
my mind.
Kelsey is really an expert in this, and she wrote a lot of the trainings on this stuff. But um, people who do that are single-handedly the most dangerous people that walk the face of the earth. They're not just a danger to the person that they're abusing; they're a danger to the public. They're a danger to law enforcement.
Children.
The people who take the lives of law enforcement in the line of duty have a past history of strangulation, and it's it's basically called the perfect crime because less than 50% of the people who have any external marks on their body. And so they suffer memory loss because of the oxygen and blood flow deprivation to the brain. And the part of the brain that is most affected by that is your memory. So they can't recall what happened to them. A lot of their injuries, if they have them, are underlying or very subtle. And if you're not paying attention to those signs, you can miss them, and then you can cause great harm to that person as a victim and a patient at that point. If we don't get them to definitive care to have some diagnostic testing to make sure that they don't have like a carotid dissection or a brain bleed or something like that. But yeah, there's 750% higher chance of being unalived by that person if they even put their hands around their neck one time. It's not a matter of if, it's when they will. And unfortunately, it is a felony, but a lot of times, majority of the times, those charges are downgraded to like a misdemeanor, time served, batters intervention programs, whatever it might be, and they're back out on the street to cause harm to that person or somebody else. And you see it time and time again, and it's so predictable. The outcome is predictable that they're going to take somebody's life.
And that's if the women press charges or
if they press charges,
pursue it, because I mean, I can see why after 2.5 years you don't want to do this anymore. You don't want to continue waiting on this court system because you're reliving the worst day of your life or days of your life every day until you get to this marker that's set by the government, and there's no rights really for you as a victim.
Yeah, it's really terrible, and it is really it's one of the biggest like risks for lethality, I think, other than a firearm, and it's just it's crazy. And a lot of times the victims recant, but there are places in the country where they don't need the victim to be victimized and go on the stand and stuff like that, and it's a matter of training everybody along the way. And we're firm believers that any person who comes in contact at any point with a victim needs to have this training, this DV awareness. They need to know these statistics. They need to know the dynamics. They need to know how a victim is going to be acting and an abuser. And really important for them to understand strangulation. And that, I mean, that starts at the 911 call. The 911 dispatcher needs it. Law enforcement needs it. Fire and EMS responding need it. Our staff in the hospital needs it. Prosecutors need it. Judges need to have all this training. Everybody needs to have it. Anybody that comes in contact all along the line, they all need to be on the same page, because you can have a successful prosecution. You can have a good outcome. You can save this person's life if everybody is on the same page and documenting accordingly. And I think that's just something we're working really hard to try to do more and more. It's just everybody likes to be in their silo. You know, cops are over here, firefighters are over here, advocates are over here. Bust down those silos, start working together, start a coordinated response, get meetings to go and get everybody in the same room and start learning all these things. And that you're going to have the best outcome for people that are experiencing this. And ultimately it's to save their life and get them free from it. So it's,
you know, and to look at the other side of the coin, which is, as a former prosecutor, my focus was always on proving a case. It wasn't until many years into this I realized it's really about saving a life. There I have tangible, the evidence base, the tools that if you, for someone watching or works with law enforcement or agency, wants to know the kinds of things Jim just suggested, how do you tangibly do that? Those tools on our website on Respond Against Violence, as are free on-demand trainings for law enforcement on strangulation, as are the articles that are research-based that I published on how to prosecute these cases without putting the victim in danger. So those things exist and they are available and they are free. So if there's one PSA you can do to put pressure on your local agencies, is to let them know that those things are free and that they need to take advantage of those things. The other side of the coin is not just the prosecution, but it is the victim's experience. And what we found with our research is that the majority of women who have experienced that type of assault believe they were going to die. And what that means is we have an incredibly traumatized person who is in an intense amount of fear after this experience. And as Jim mentioned, officers might respond, because we know victims mainly call the police when they need it to stop and need to survive or think they're going to die. So officers come, they see no injuries on the neck. She can, as you saw in Gabby's video, even articulate the thing that just happened. They see injuries on the suspect, which is the most common injury after a strangulation, is an injury on the suspect, even though it's superficial. And that's how things go backwards. And so it's so important to understand the role of trauma and being able to communicate and the impact that strangulation and fear has on it. And knowing that surviving one of these types of assaults means this is someone who experienced death, but they are alive to talk about it, is a missed opportunity to not protect them and recognize what they experienced. But law enforcement will walk into that not knowing what just happened and then be surprised they can't articulate it, as you can so vividly see in Gabby's video.
I think that one of the best ways it was explained to me was, like, if you take the whole event, how everything happened, if you could write all those things down, like on a piece of paper, and then you take that paper up and you fold it up and then you rip it into pieces and then you throw the pieces everywhere, because slowly as they start calming down, as the blood flow and oxygen starts returning to the brain, it's like they're picking up little pieces of it. And now it sounds like it's just an unbelievable story. Like, you're making, well, what do you mean you remember it now? You didn't remember it 10 minutes ago. And so I think understanding those dynamics are important.
Yeah.
And also,
And in Gabby's case, they don't even let her say the words out loud. They just keep interrupting, answering, like they don't even let her have a moment to answer the question.
no. And a lot of times too, even the people who are experiencing that type of abuse, they don't even understand, you know, they'll say like, oh, he just choked me a little bit. And, you know, they don't even, until you actually say, no, this is what this is. And, you know, let me explain it to you. And, you know, in a real trauma informed way, they don't even associate it with, oh, he just put his hands on my neck for a little bit, or he just covered my mouth.
Hey, Nikki, do you still have tea in that coffee cup?
Yes.
Real quick, because I want to go back to something that kind of Katie brought up. Before I do, just real quick housekeeping, because I've been bad about this. to get this live out to more people, please tap that screen. Don't stop doing that. But also follow everybody on here. Jim, Nikki, the Gabby Petito Foundation. I guess you can follow Joe if you feel like it.
You don't have to follow me. It's okay.
Katie and Kelsey. But the other thing I will say too is just real quick, obviously, with the documentary and everything coming out, they're all having to relive all of this, but at the same time, it's allowing us to have this discussion and bring it back up. And I just want to make a plug for the Gabby Petito Foundation. They do a lot of the work that they do completely out of their own pockets. And I'm going to tell you right now that they make credit. I'm wearing my burn. You can't tell, but I'm wearing my burn after reading shirt, Nikki. I did have the hoodie on, but I was too hot, so I took that off. But the clothing that they make is very, very high end. The money goes to a great cause. You can go to GabbyPetitoFoundation.org and purchase, and it's just a small way that you can kind of help. And by getting certain items, it's got I think this one does it have the foundation somewhere. Yeah, here it on the arm, and the hoodie has it here and on the back, so you can advertise the foundation as well by doing that. Plus, again, it's really good quality. At the same time, the reason that we have it on subscriber chat only is because some people, we'll just say it, some people on the internet are jerks, if you guys are surprised by that. And so to prevent that from happening on a live this big, that's what we made it. But what I made the decision to do is any subscribers that I get for February, we're gonna split the proceeds, like from February 1st to the beginning of the month, and we're gonna give some of those proceeds, a good bit of those proceeds, to the Gabby Petito Foundation as well. And then the last thing I will say is we did a podcast brand new called Real Victims. That's what this one in the bottom corner is. And it launched today. And we had Jim and Nikki and Rose on talking about the Lifetime movie, which I want to make very clear is very separate than the new Netflix documentary. It is not the same thing. And you can get to that on any of your favorite podcast platforms. But I have a link to Apple in my link tree. Now, with that said, Katie, so you were talking about the legal process here. And you said 2.5, 3 years you're now into this for court. So I'm going to give a trigger warning on where I'm going with this. And Kelsey, because of what you said earlier, you might want to chime in on some of this as well. So covering the stuff that I cover, we hear some pretty terrible stories. And let's talk about children for a second. Okay. I'm not going to name names for the purpose of this family's request, but you'll probably know who I'm talking about. A year and a half or so ago, 2 years ago, there was a little girl in upstate New York who was nabbed off of her bike while she was riding a trail camping with her family. They did find her. They said that the 48 hours is critical, and they found her at the 47th hour. And she was still alive. She was locked in this trailer in a cabinet, and she had been SA'd. And the family came on, and it was me, and talked about it. But part of the situation is they ended up allowing for a plea deal to happen. The guy's older. He will, based on the years, probably die in prison. But they kept trying to put this 8-year-old girl through interview after interview after interview in the court system. There's another person who's on this app. Her name is Jordan, mutual of mine. She's at work and she gets a phone call that the FBI is at her house. And what happened was she has a 2-year-old daughter, and her partner was apparently getting in trouble for CSAM, which, for those of y'all who don't know what that is, it is child abuse material, in which he used their 2-year-old daughter to create. And she had to continue, even after he had been arrested on federal charges, she still had to fight for custody of her daughter. And again, then you're talking about a child who's 2 years old who can't really articulate what happened to her. And that makes her not a very good witness. And so they ended up, again, taking a plea deal, but he'll be out by the time this little girl's 18, despite what he did. And I can probably give you at least a dozen more stories that I have heard like that, and what they put these kids through, like what Katie's having to go through for years of doing this. And I think that is also, I know, as Joe said earlier, you can't just change these things. You have to take the little steps. But it's a real problem to continue to make victims, or survivors, we'll say, of abuse, to continue to relive these things over and over and over again for years at a time. And there was even a case where, because of COVID, a little girl had been.
It was like why they stopped talking. So when we say they recanted or they don't cooperate, it's not true. It's the system that is uncooperative with them and makes them in danger or re-traumatized. So I have a couple comments on that, but I will let you finish. But I also have some good solutions for that.
Yeah, and I'll finish up with this one. There was also, during COVID, there were several cases where people told me about where the child might have been 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, and they backlogged all these cases, put these toward the back, and now a few years, 4 or 5 years later, the kids don't have the memory that they once had, and so now they're having to dismiss these cases because the kids forgot, because when you're 4, 5, or 6, you don't remember the details, and now they're no longer credible witnesses, and it's a problem. And yeah, Kelsey, go right ahead.
Oh my, okay. I'm going to make this easy, mostly because I will promise that I will put on and send to Nikki and Jim to put on their website tomorrow some tangible solutions now that we've expressed some of the problems. I've been a child abuse prosecutor as well. There are accommodations that we make for children that we do not make for trauma survivors. And there are solutions that we can build that bridge, because although all those are horrible, sad stories, I have worked with children in that capacity, and they are treated different than women like Katie and Gabby. And that is because as soon as you turn 18 or you look like a grown woman, you are no longer treated like a trauma victim, and we give that luxury to children. What we do with children is we give them what's called a forensic interview. Essentially, you have like a social worky kind of person in a nice environment that's comfortable, ask them questions that don't make them feel defensive, and they're recorded and documented and can be used in trial, even if that child cannot participate in a prosecution. It's an exception that allows that in, even if the kid can't be there. That's different for women. And as you can see, just learning that trauma communication is important. Here's a wonderful program that has started to develop, and it's called the Adult Forensic Interviewing Program. And it is Texas Forensic Nurse Examiners has developed it and have trained social workers to do the interviews with adult women of trafficking, domestic violence, SA, and those types of crimes. And it has allowed to facilitate actual conversation, not interrupting, and has also allowed a trauma-informed platform that then can lead. It's recorded, so the victim doesn't have to repeat it over and over and over, which is right. It's something I did as a prosecutor because I didn't know better. That's one aspect. The other thing I wanted to address is I saw connected to this conversation a lot of women or people in the commenting about children in domestic violence. And I think that's very important. I've also seen a lot of comments about law enforcement won't help. And I want to encourage a quick resource is I did a series of podcasts. I don't have a podcast. I just did them for someone else, and they ended up being a conversation that I think is helpful for survivors, called Journey of a Survivor Through the System. And it talks about what it is like to go through this system as a survivor. And there's also a resource on the website about post-separation abuse. And that is where we see children used as pawns in domestic violence. And I want to acknowledge for a moment, any woman who is listening, who has children with an abuser, who has had to go through the family court system, I hear you, and you are not wrong. And there is not a good solution right now. And that kind of is the problem. The family court system in America is even more broken than the criminal system. And women are having to give their children to their abusers every single night, including at least 50 women who I am talking to this week. And it's horrifying. I know that is not necessarily the conversation in this particular case. And I know Katie didn't have children, but there are many women who do. And that becomes the tool and the weapon to keep a victim engaged, because there's nothing more valuable than your child. So when you have a child with an abuser, you can't just leave. You leave, you're leaving your kids alone with them. So we will put more resources up about that, because it is a devastating conversation and there is not a really good solution. But in terms of communication, the Adult Forensic Interviewing Program is something that helps solve that with adult victims like we do with children. And there are legal exceptions that we have created for children so they don't have to relive it in a courtroom. There are ways to get around that. And we have to incorporate survivors of trauma We have to start to make laws that allow the recognition of that. And there's a really good statute and case law around victims not having to testify, and it overcomes the confrontation clause. So the main issue that you have to have a victim testify is because the rights in the criminal justice system are for the rights of the defendant. It is the accused justice. And they have the right to confront the quote accuser. And I hate that term. And our TikTok actually has a whole conversation about using the word accuser. But in the criminal system, they have the right to cross-examine them. There is one exception to that right. And that is something that the abuser has to forfeit. So it has to be their fault. The victim can't come to court. I know that's a whole nother conversation. Sorry for going on a little tangent.
No, I asked you to interject, so you're good.
Yeah, but I have resources. All those things are on our website, and particularly the information about women who have children with an abuser. I think your best ally is the post-separation wheel, which is on Gabby's website right now. And that post-separation wheel will help you identify the tactics they use when you try to leave. Many of them are around using your children.
Yeah, it makes sense because they know that gives them more control.
Right. Seems easy. I feel like I wish judges understood what you just said, Justin.
Well, I can't speak for them, but it goes back to what Jim was saying, that every single facet that involves any group, organization, profession that touches on this subject needs this training, which again, that's going to go to judges, law enforcement, EMS, hospitals, doctors, etc. And need to have this knowledge.
Well, I'm bringing them all together, not like the silo is the issue, is everyone thinks this is my job, this is your job. But having community conversations like this is important because you see what other people's role is, what they can do, what you can't do. And the abusers have like a coordinated strategy in the criminal legal system, and it's often called a defense attorney. And they have that coordination. Survivors, victims don't have attorneys. They don't have the same right to an attorney. There aren't attorneys. This is why so many people call me. And that's the issue, is they rely on the police and the prosecutor to represent them, and they don't represent the victim.
Somebody just asked a very good question. This, I think, is going to be for you. Here's another good question. What can DV survivors that have no contact orders do to make sure they feel safe? Because there's a lot that don't feel safe even with a no contact order.
Well, I only stayed on the run for about 9 months. I lived in 5 different states my first year. I think there's self-defense you can do, but I truly think it just takes time and distance before you really feel safe again. I'm 2 years out and I still get panicked if I think I'm going to be even in the same state as my abuser. And I think that's just something that you learn to cope with more than you find ways to stay safe long term. If you've got the self-defense, if you know how to protect yourself, those are the things that you learn to live with.
And also trust your instinct. I saw someone mention the gift of fear earlier. The truth is some of these things can't be solved. Like there aren't solutions yet to make men not murder. There isn't that solution. And I really, really encourage survivors to trust their instinct. And so much of the messaging is minimizing and it wasn't a big deal and I'm sure you'll be okay. The truth is there's no better instinct than that of a survivor who has navigated it. And Katie and I have had this conversation. She knows her abuser better than I do. And so the customized path is to trust your instinct. And those who are supporters of survivors is to not minimize that instinct. And I wish I had a better answer, but the truth is that's the problem. We're in danger.
Now, I know it's been almost 2 hours, and I know there's one other thing I know that Nikki had mentioned that she wanted to address. If you still want to, you wanted to address the one friend from the documentary.
Yeah, and I don't want to harp on it. I just seen a couple comments online with some views of the young girl who was friends with both Gabby and Brian, and I just want everybody to know that she's a beautiful person inside and out, and there was no reason to put any negativity there. So I'm going to leave it at that. She's just wonderful, and she doesn't deserve any of that. So,
Yeah, we
also,
don't.
can I just mention it is February 22nd, National Margarita Day, and it's Joe's birthday.
Happy birthday, Joe.
Well, happy birthday, Joe.
On the East Coast, it's February 22nd. Sorry.
It is National Margarita Day, so I will have to have a margarita.
I think Joe, I would say you could give Joe some gifts for, but Joe literally has no idea how to access them. And
Yeah.
I tried.
Do you like it on the rocks or
He
frozen?
still doesn't get it.
He's probably got like $1,000 sitting in there.
He probably does, and he has no clue how to get to it.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Even though when I was physically with him, I was like, I will show you. And he was like, no, it's okay.
That's how Katie helps me. Joe, do you like it on the rocks or frozen?
So I like my spirits right out of the bottle. A margarita, I want frozen with an umbrella. Put some, give me some fancy fruit, like hook it up. Yeah, yeah.
No salt?
You know
The
what we should do?
floofier, the better.
You know what I think we ought to do, guys? We ought to crowdfund the Margaritaville margarita maker for Joe.
I have one.
Oh, you have one? I got one too. They're great.
Oh my God. And someone with
I
a
don't
cricket
have one.
machine can write,
It's your birthday.
happy birthday, Joe. I'll make you a t-shirt.
Well, thank
We
you.
could crowd one for Nikki. Nikki could use some margaritas.
I
Awesome.
like margarita.
Do what?
I said I like margaritas.
Well, come up and visit, and I'll make you one. Or just go ahead and move here.
I'm in Texas and we have the best margaritas.
I'm in Florida. We can have ours on the beach.
See, you were right there. You win.
Texas, you can have it too, depending on where you are. You can go down to
Texas,
South Padre and have one there.
Happy birthday,
Well, we'll
Joe.
be seeing you. We'll be
Thank
seeing you in Texas soon, right? I'm going to be at the conference in May.
That's right. That's right. There's there's also a wonderful, so Nikki and Jim, and I don't know if Joe or if you're going to be there. I think your wife is going to be at the conference.
Tara.
But a wonderful conference. The Conference on Crimes Against Women is in May. And I'm in charge of the pre-conference, which is about strangulation. And we're going to talk about untangling evidence in these cases. Most importantly, immediately for any of your audience is they have incredible podcasts that are entertaining and educational and really well done on their website. So anyone who is going, oh, I want to learn more, I want to know more, you can scroll through the Conference on Crimes Against Women or the Genesis Women's Shelters podcast. And like even I, as a practitioner who's an expert, constantly am listening to them and taking notes. So feel free. That's just, if you're a podcast person who wants to consume some educational stuff, they have the best speakers on those podcasts.
Great. And what was I just going to say? I want to say thank you to your subs, Dustin, because you did tell them you were supporting the Gabby Petito Foundation tonight with some of that.
Not even just that. We're going to just do it all month because I'm too lazy to try to figure out any calculations. Anything.
I'm with you on that.
So anything for February, we're splitting, which I'm very glad to do because it is a very good cause, and and again, I'm going to encourage people to go buy stuff from the Gabby Petito Foundation. I mean, I know the margins. I can tell you because I have a shop too that I never ever promote, but the margins are thin, but the advertising is important.
And the conversation. I find when people are wearing something, it starts a conversation. If you have a coffee mug, if you have a saying, the number of people that stop. Katie, are you wearing the uncooperative shirt? That when you just have something that people can see on a shirt, they will stop and have a conversation. And that begins a conversation. And so any of the merch, and we'll put some stuff up and we'll give all of our proceeds to them if it's connected to Gabby Petito. But it's unbelievable how easy it is to start a conversation if you have something on your t-shirt.
Yeah, I have my Burn After Reading one. I love it. Again, very high quality stuff. I have
That's our top seller. That's our top. Did you see I made it a hat as well as a hoodie? So
Well, I didn't see that. And then what else? Do you guys have a lot of good stuff? There's really a lot of good stuff on there.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I really hope that you follow everybody on here. The more people that follow, especially when we're talking about the conversation surrounding what Jim, Nikki, and Joe are doing and the Gabby Petito Foundation, which all of them are up here. the more people that follow them, the more times when they go live or they do videos get pushed out, and it helps spread the word on that conversation. These very important conversations we need to be having, and obviously that's true of Katie and Kelsey as well. So it's important that's why it's important to do these follows. It really is. So, and I will say this too, if you are interested, because I do have a lot I need to get rid of so I can reorder assuming TikTok doesn't go away. If you would like to order a copy of Boundaries, while we're finishing up, I can put them up here.
Will you sign a copy if we get one?
I'll sign a copy. Yeah, I can do that.
Kelsey, he signs them, but you cannot read his handwriting. So
that's okay. It's like I'll just be like, I have an autograph.
I felt there was a little bit of bitter hate there, Justin. I don't know if you caught that.
There was a little bit. Joe's got a copy.
I have a copy, and mine's
I'll
legible.
get a photocopy from Joe. I'm joking.
I have a signed copy, but it's not signed to me. It was a mistake.
we got Justin's leftovers.
You did, because that's what I had.
Love it. That's okay. I have extra swag, and then I give it out.
All right. The hardcover is the better deal than the soft cover, but yeah, so there you go.
Is there a website or something?
You can go to my website, which is justthenickelcrime.com. It's also in the TikTok shop. So you can.
I'm going to let Katie tell me how to do that later.
I just pinned it.
There's a little link on the bottom. You can just click on that.
I told you I'd send you guys one because of what y'all are doing. The advocacy and the knowledge is important. I don't have a problem. I mean, if you want to purchase one, I'm not going to stop you from doing that, but I'm also happy to send you one.
Okay. Or we can
Kelsey, I'll just send him your address.
Okay, good deal. And I have some funny stuff I'll send you too. Here's the thing: so many people on social media, podcasts, all of those things. It's just a re-exploitation. So the fact that you allowed this kind of free-flowing conversation and let me interrupt and put in some of the advocacy and are really having a real conversation, it is not common, and I appreciate that. I am almost universally decline ever letting any of my clients or survivors I work with ever talk to the media because you don't usually see that. So I've gotten to know Nikki and Jim, and I trust them. And when they said you were this kind of guy, and so I'm grateful I got to experience it. I'm grateful Katie got to come on. She has such incredible insight, and I'm so proud of her, and leads with such an incredible voice, I think, for this conversation. So I'm happy to have gotten to know all of you guys tonight.
Likewise, and I agree. And I've said this to them before. I like the four of them, Nikki, Jim, even though Tara's not in here, and Joe. Like I hate how we all met, but I love that I know them. Like Joe and Jim are nothing but trouble. But
well, that's the only people I associate.
You're acting offended.
You know why I like this format is because a lot of the times the media and Jim and Nikki and Tara, they'll all speak to it. A lot of times the media will sidestep a parent. Mm-hmm. I mean, a step parent. I mean, like they'll talk to Nikki and Jim and Tara and myself, but you'll only see me and Nikki up there and stuff like that. And that's, Jim and Tara have been in Gabby's life since she was 1 year old. They are just as much a parent than anyone else. That's like saying an adoptive parent doesn't matter. You know what I mean? That's not. It's not right the way a step parent. With the media, even in the court system, is just null and void in a lot of ways, and that just shouldn't be. That really bothers me.
I agree.
My husband's parents are divorced, and he watched this documentary with me. And I know it's not the point of the documentary, but to see how the introduction of you guys to each other as step parents was incredibly powerful for things totally apart from domestic violence. But it was such a beautiful thing to watch. And I actually think will touch a lot of people in a totally different way who consume this.
Joe and I actually go and play golf together and stuff. We had like a guy's trip with our attorney and his friend.
And we got to do that again, by the way, because apparently he took lessons.
Yeah.
That's rude.
I will tell you this, though. Don't ever trust beardless Jim. Don't trust that guy.
Don't trust the beardless Jim. Yeah, it's really coming a lot of gray, but it has come in really well.
They make these things. They make these things that look like mascara pins that you can run through them, and it hides.
That's what I do on my route sometimes.
Beardless Jim got me hammered on a golf course on Fireball.
Oh, that's.
I didn't do that. I was the responsible one that day.
Yeah.
Maybe I do need to come to y'all's golf outing and just drive.
Maybe we need to do one here, like in Austin. Justin, do you ever come to Austin?
I used to live in San Antonio, but I haven't been back in years.
That doesn't count.
It does too count.
I will
San
tell you,
Antonio's a
San
bigger city.
Antonio Police Department has really stepped up and implemented the danger assessment with their entire community over the last few months. So a little
Good.
like that.
That's awesome. That's what you need to see.
Yep, it's taken a while, and they are there, and and they have one of our highest rates of homicides in Texas. So that's incredible. So Justin, you can have San Antonio for that.
It's like, I'm good being in Tennessee. I don't mind having left San Antonio. My favorite city in Texas was Dallas. And you can cringe at me all you want for that. Dallas had everything and then some.
I just
Stockyard, Fort Worth.
Well, DFW, that whole area. Yeah, the stockyards. I actually got engaged in Fort Worth.
Oh, really?
Did you marry her?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I just didn't know if that was the conversation.
She's awesome. Actually, we finally got to see her face not that long ago.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, you need to come up. Well, I told her, I said to her today, I was like, why don't you guys come up for puppy yoga or whatever? And she goes, well, maybe. I'm like, that's so non-committal of you. Like,
You want to? I wish you were there when you saw Nikki's face watching LL Cool J go right by her, and she just like looked up and was just like, Jim, and he was gone, and her face was like so mad.
She's like, I think that's LL Cool J, and I'm like, yeah, that's LL Cool J.
And then Joe has a picture.
Joe has a picture.
Well, you wouldn't know it by Jim's TikTok because he cut me out.
I cut you out.
I did.
Because we get confused for each other all the time, and people are gonna be like, "Oh, you shaved the beard." I'm like, I couldn't.
They would have thought that was
That's why you did it.
Nikki
That's why you
to
did
get
it.
LL Cool J to take a photo.
So I didn't even move fast enough. Joe already had gotten a photo, but Joe, I think, did you tell him about the golf outing or something, or you just gave her a bracelet?
I told him the stuff that we're doing. I told him about the golf outing. So, yeah.
Oh, by the way, Justin, we're gonna do a 5K run up in New York.
Did you see me? Well, no, you didn't see me in Rose's live when you were doing it. And I said, I'm out on running.
But I would do margaritas. I would do that event.
I think we should do a margarita. Like, I want to rent one of those ice cream trucks, but like a margarita truck, and just drive around to town and see what happens.
In Austin, they have the things where you like ride a bicycle, but it's like a bar on the move and like down the street, and you get exercise and also drink.
Yeah, I'm good for that.
Yeah,
I'm good with that one too. Because this is what I want to do: is drink and exercise.
Austin's not sounding too bad now, huh?
This is why I play golf, so I can just drive a golf cart and do that.
Yeah, and we have those pedal caverns in Nashville, but we also have little boats that you can go on, and they're like little floating tiki huts, and they drive you all around the lake.
As long as I can wear my flip-flops, I'm good to go.
You don't have to wear any shoes, Joe.
That's even better.
You know how many people pass away in gyms every year working out? Way too many.
The most dangerous thing to do as a woman is to go on a run.
Yeah,
I believe that.
This is why I don't jog.
I lost my high school art teacher. She was also a coach, but she was my art teacher, and it happened on Long Island. She was unalived and assaulted by a person that was let out. He was let out of prison, and it took less than a day. He did that.
Yeah.
And she was a mother of two children, and it was awful.
You know, to circle that into something less upsetting but also empowering is another organization that I've done work with is Project Beloved. And you were talking about trauma-informed things, and we do stuff with our nonprofit, but she has really advocated for what they call soft interview rooms, which is right now as a victim, you end up basically in the same interrogation room a suspect would be in. So when we talk about trauma-informed like communication, it is a way to install rooms in police departments that look like a living room, feel like a living room, and it's kind of one touch point to change that environment. And her daughter was, sorry, what is the word? I don't want to get kicked off. She was unalived. And then a couple days later, he unalived another woman in a park. And there were 8 survivors before that where it could have been stopped. And she is a mama with a mission. And so there are so many wonderful things for people to connect to. Although these stories are depressing, there's some real tangible things that we have out there to participate in, even in a small way. You don't have to get deep into the woods on things. One of the things we did recently are these untangled bags that are inspired just to give easy, tangible things to survivors to use while they communicate. And so there are ways to get involved that you can not walk away feeling disheartened from these conversations. And that is what building those alternative pathways are about, is how do we build hope and happiness out of this pain? And I think, Joe, you mentioned like the system can't change. It's not about changing the system. The system's broken. But in terms of people who are paying attention right now, and y'all, there are things that we can do to change that conversation and still have happiness in our life and have little wins. And those are just some of the suggestions. So
You're absolutely right. 100%. One of the programs that we have on one of the partnerships that we have on the Alliance is called Purple One, right, Nikki? And if you're a business owner, you can, Nikki, if you want to speak to it, you know more about them.
Purple One is a bystander training program for communities, and they give their trainings fully online, but they do it in person in their area. But right now, if you don't live in that area, you obviously have to do it online. But they teach communities how to be good bystanders, how to respond to domestic violence, and if you have a business, you will get a purple dot, and in your community, that purple dot means that a survivor or a victim has somewhere to go where they know that someone in there is trained to connect them to services. So it's a really, really cool program. I highly suggest.
So if there's any business owners out there,
yeah,
go to the Gabby Alliance and really check that one out. That's a good one.
It's great. We want to get it nationwide. We want every community to have this program. So it will make more bystanders and more like advocates out there, so I love it. Thanks for bringing that up, Joe.
And then you can also learn how to do that as a man by rewinding and saying what Jim said.
Yeah.
This live is going to go on YouTube at some point in the near future. I'm going to send it over to Natasha probably this evening. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, if you missed it, you can go back and rewind it that way. Yeah.
I mean, that clip, if any man can take away anything, it's just doing that for his daughter and doing that for his friend or doing that for any woman, because Jim's right. Women experience every day that nonstop. And it's dangerous for us to sometimes say something, but for another man to say it, it not only protects us, it also stops it.
Hopefully it empower others too.
Yeah. He said sometimes when you have the language to copy, it's helpful. And that was pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Well, so Purple One, wait, I'm just seeing some comments here. Purple One could be anywhere. It's
really new in development. It's very localized right now in Pennsylvania, but they just launched it. So they do have online trainings. If you go to the website, you can sign up for the training. Anyone can take it. It's especially great for business owners because you can just be that safe place. But it was a great training. Tara and I both took it, and I learned more in that training than I've learned in a lot of trainings I've taken. So just really, really great. So you can get there through our website, or you can just go to purpleone.org.
So yeah, and it could be anywhere, and they'll train you virtually if need be. And if someone here does take it, talk to other community members, and hopefully they'll take it too. And again, that's how we're going to beat domestic violence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Katie moved.
Call your police.
She moved her head. I swear it.
And ask them if they have a lethality or danger assessment that they use. That's one phone call. The answer is probably going to be no.
So, Kelsey, if I can ask you a question. Yeah. So one of the things that we voted on as the committee down here in Florida when we passed the LAP is to give the lethality assessment to the prosecutor when there's an arrest. Would you find that helpful? Because it only can be used during arraignment, though. Would you find that helpful when it comes to harsher bail or something along those lines?
That's a really good question. And the answer is, if as a prosecutor, I understood what those questions meant and I could articulate it to a judge, 150%. But most prosecutors don't know what those questions mean. No one has ever told them what a lethality assessment even is. And so that is why programs like Jeannie Geiger Institute, which created the version of the danger assessment made for law enforcement, they have a different buy-in than like ones that you can find online. And that is because they require the commitment of the prosecutor, the judges, the law enforcement, the community, before they will even let you have their tool. And now the tool is similar in that it is based on the same research. But unless a prosecutor understands dynamics and risk and what it means, it's hard to articulate it to a judge.
So let me let's just ask another question then.
Mm-hmm.
When you study for the bar, how much of it is focused on domestic violence?
Not 1%. I have never, I mean, I eat, sleep, and breathe domestic violence, and it's not because I learned about it in law school. It's because when I got to be a prosecutor, I couldn't believe I didn't know anything about it.
So there might be another focus for us, Jim and Nikki.
Yeah. And I have that, like, I wrote the article for prosecutors on prosecuting strangulation. I have the podcast. That's a really good, there are ways to fix and solve that, but same with law enforcement in that they do so law enforcement does what they are told based on protocol, which is why it's important to get the buy-in of the brass to make them implement and use a lethality assessment. But your everyday officer, yeah, it's valuable for him to ask the questions, score it, and refer them to resources. But what I really try to educate law enforcement and prosecutors on is these, quote, prevention tools aren't just prevention tools. They will help you prove your case. And I always ask prosecutors and law enforcement, are they in the business of proving or preventing crime? And the world thinks they prevent crime, but they don't. They see their job as proving crime. What's so amazing about things like the lethality assessment and our strangulation supplement is you can do both at once. You can both use these tools to get better evidence, more successful prosecutions, not put a victim in danger. And at the same time, the bonus is you can stop domestic violence homicide because they are inherently the things that can stop it, regardless of a successful prosecution.
Well, thank you for that. So that's something that we have to focus on then. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a fair point.
And I've sent Joe, I'll have them share. I gave Nikki and Jim some, there's also an incredible lethality webinar series on DV risk. I don't think that we had time to get those up today, but it is, when we talk about lethality indicators, these individual things, strangulation, pregnancy, controlling, jealousy, all those things, to really break them down is a whole nother level. And there was a webinar series recently that took each one of them individually. And they're like 90-minute sessions. I think they did 5 or 6 of them. I did the one on strangulation. And I really just think it's such an incredible tool. My dream is to have a conference where like one day is per lethality indicator, to not just know the question of the red flag, but to understand it, how to follow up. So like strangulation is one of the questions. So what then we do is say you've identified it. Here's the tool we've developed to then not just get the answer, yes, it exists, but then how are you going to collect the evidence on it?
Kelsey, do you have a podcast?
I don't, but I will do other people's podcasts. I'm not organized enough to do my own, but that's where I've put on my website, Crimes Against Women, Genesis. Kind of our natural conversation ended up in what I call the journey of a survivor. And it's really like over the years, as I'd get angry about something and solve it, then they would want to do a podcast. One day I imagine, but right now I'll just do things with other people until I get my life more. I'm just joining TikTok tonight. And Katie, thank you for joining. And I know that's a lot to share and putting you on the spot, but so beautifully articulated and so insightful.
Yeah, Justin, thank you for letting me invite Katie and
Always.
Kelsey in.
Always.
Well, I think that's one of the things we were talking about tonight was, when we're talking about prevention education programs or reaching or at-risk youth, meeting them where they are. And this is where they are. They're on social media. So finding those outlets to be able to get that information out there to them. And I think it's huge. And you guys both have really huge followings and stuff. And I really think that'll start making a difference. So,
yeah. And I want to say before we do go, of course, I appreciate you guys coming on. I know that we talked about this kind of stuff a bit, but it's been a while since you've had this kind of this large of an audience for this type of a topic. So I know it's hard to relive all of this again. So I appreciate you guys having the conversation because I think it's a beneficial thing. And for all the audience, follow everybody again on this screen. If you've been here long enough and you know, I hope that you would have gotten something good out of it. You know what Jim and Nikki and Joe before you left were doing. The GPF that's real quiet right here, that's Gabby Petito Foundation. So definitely follow that because I think you guys are going to start posting more on that. I don't know. Every once in a while I talk to you about it, I'm like, you need to post more on it. And then you don't. But I also had that conversation with Joe. Oh my gosh, there are two Nickies.
I'm like, there are two Nickies.
well,
calm it down. Calm it down.
Obsessed.
It's out of my comfort zone as it is, so I'm trying to break free.
Oh, whatever, Jim, you love it. Two Nickies, you love that. But
I would love.
The other thing too is the book is still pinned if you want to purchase it. I see a couple of y'all got it. I will sign them. They will go out tomorrow. I will get them packed. We'll get a tracking number tonight if you purchase it. And then also I would be remiss if I didn't tag the podcast one more time. So like I said, we did do, if you want to learn more information than what you saw from the documentary, what you learned tonight, we did the podcast called It's Real Victims. We did it with the Gabby Petito story from the movie that was done on Lifetime where Jim and Nikki critique it. And there is some information in there that's not been in documentaries and other things that y'all talked about, you guys and Rose. And it also makes it so you don't have to watch that movie, which I encourage none of y'all to watch that movie because we don't want them to have the views. And it was terrible. It was at some points laughably cringe. Like it was bad.
I mean, I suggest just like Googling like cast.
I showed Alyssa your cast.
Oh, that's
today.
exciting.
I showed Alyssa who you were today.
I mean, it was pretty accurate.
Yes, and I showed Rose, and she was like, Alyssa was like, "Oh, they got Jim spot on."
Wow.
Oh, I'm excited to do this now.
They had my beard before I grew a beard. You know, I had great hair.
They knew.
I was like muscular.
Oh, I'm excited to do that, but I don't want to give them any kind of like hits or validity. So
No,
I'll
you can
just
Google the cast. You Google the movie, and then just look at the cast on IMDb.
Yeah, just look at the photos.
Well, I hope they feel sad about themselves tonight.
Nikki,
what was your angel card? To add on a positive note, what was your angel card today? Have you done it?
No, I didn't pull it yet. I was going to do it right before bed. It's just going to be soon.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate everyone, and we'll do something a little bit like this again soon, and hopefully Katie and Kelsey, we can get you guys on for something as well individually.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It was so great to meet everyone, and I hope to see you guys all again soon.
Absolutely.
We'll talk again soon, Katie.
Thank you for sharing tonight, Katie.
Everyone have a great night. We'll see you guys soon.